All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second meeting of the Legislative Commission in this calendar year 2024. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Backus? Present. Assemblyman DeLong?
Present.
Assemblywoman Hanson? Assemblywoman Howdeggy?
Present.
Assemblyman Watts?
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager?
Here.
Senator Daly?
Here.
Senator Hanson?
Here.
Senator Krasner?
Here.
Senator Stone?
Here.
Vice Chair Harris?
Present.
Chair Canizaro?
That was a here. This afternoon, we're going to have 6 members attending here in Grant Sawyer in Las Vegas and 3 in Carson City, as well as 1 member attending virtually. Madam Secretary, please mark Assemblywoman Hanson present when she arrives. We expect her shortly. We do have a quorum present, but before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to go over. I'd like to ask all of those who testify to state and spell their names for the record before testifying. If anyone would like to receive a copy of the Commission's agendas, meetings, or reports, you may be added to our mailing list by following the links on the Legislature's website or by providing information to our staff. Contact information for staff is also listed on the Legislature's website. In addition, we accept written comments, which may be emailed or mailed before, during, or after the meeting. The information regarding where to send written comments is also on the website and listed on the agenda for this meeting. The next item on our agenda is public comment. We will be accepting public comment at this time from persons present here in the Grant Sawyer building, then those attending the meeting at the Legislative Building in Carson City, and then from persons wishing to provide public comment by phone. If you prefer to wait to speak until later, there will be a second period for public comment at the end of the meeting. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. If there are any people in our audience here in Las Vegas who wish to participate and provide public comment at this time, please come forward to the table in front of the dais. We ask any person who wishes to speak to identify yourself for the record each time you speak and ensure that you sign in on the clipboard by the door before you leave if you haven't already. Okay, it doesn't appear that we have anyone here in Las Vegas who wishes to provide public comment. It looks like we're ready to move to Carson City. Are there people in the Legislative Building in Carson City who wish to provide any public comment at this time? Please feel free to come forward to the table in front of the dais. Okay. We will then move to our persons who would like to provide public comment by phone. If you've called in and you'd like to speak during this part of the meeting, you'll be notified by our broadcast and production services staff when you've been connected and it's your turn to speak. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person. You're welcome to submit any additional comments in writing and they will be added to the record for this meeting. If you prefer to wait until later, there will be a second period for public comment at the end of the meeting. I'm going to turn it over now to our staff of our broadcast and production services to queue up anyone calling in to speak. A member of the BPF staff will inform you when it is your turn to speak. BPS, any callers at this time?
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to participate in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Paul Klein with Tri-Strategies, here speaking on behalf of the Nevada Physical Therapy Board. I just wanted to say that we appreciate all the work that everybody has done specific to the regulations that you will review and hopefully approve today. And if you have any need for any further materials, Mr. Charles Harvey is there for that. And I appreciate all your time and effort. Thank you.
Chair, you have no more callers wishing to participate at this time.
Great, thank you so much. We, of course, will have a second period of public comment at the end before we adjourn. So those of you who may have missed it can certainly join us at the end of our agenda today. We will move on to item number 3, which is the approval of the minutes. Commission members, please note that you have in your packet the draft minutes from the Legislative Commission meetings held on December 14th, 2023, and also February 26th of 2024. These draft minutes are also available on the Legislature's website, and you should have been able to take a look at those as well. Let me ask first if there is any discussion on these minutes. I am not seeing or hearing any, so at this time I would accept a motion to approve both sets of minutes of the Legislative Commission. So moved from Speaker Yeager. I have a second from Vice Chair Harris. Let's go ahead and rather than do our roll call votes today, I'm going to do voice votes and just make sure we get everybody. That'll help us go a little bit more quickly. If there is anyone who approves of these minutes, let's hear you say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing no nays, the minutes for the December 14th and February 26th meetings of the Legislative Commission are approved unanimously. That takes us to item number 4 on our agenda, which is our administrative regulations. We have with us our legislative counsel, Asher Killian, who is in Carson City today to assist us with this item. Members, you will note that there are 2 regulations which were submitted for early review pursuant to NRS 233B.0681. That section provides for the early review of a proposed permanent regulation after the agency has given notice of a hearing on the regulation, but before the hearing is held. If the Legislative Commission approves the regulation under this early review section and the permanent regulation adopted after the agency hearing is identical to the regulation submitted for early review, the Legislative Council is required to promptly file the regulation with the Secretary of State and notify the agency of the filing. If the regulation as adopted by the agency is not identical to the one submitted for early review, the regulation must come back to us at the Legislative Commission for approval in the same manner as if the early review had not occurred. All right, we will start with the revised proposed regulation submitted by the State Board of Pharmacy, which is R100-23. Members, you will note that we have a copy of R100-23 on your desks today and also on the Nevada Legislature's website under the tab for this meeting, which you will find by hitting the button in the upper right-hand corner of the homepage, which says View Events. I believe that we have with us Dave Wiest, representing the State Board of Pharmacy, and we should have him with us in Carson City to answer any questions. Oh, no, I'm sorry, we have him on Zoom. There you are. Excellent. So we will go ahead and start with that particular regulation. And so we will go with any questions from the members regarding our 100-23. We'll start here in Las Vegas. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, we will move to Carson City. Anyone have questions on this particular regulation?
Yes, Chair. Assemblyman DeLong. I have a question.
Yes, Assemblyman, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question on page 12. I'm just wondering why subsection 4 has been essentially entirely struck. If you could just explain the reasoning for that.
Thank you for the question. If you give me a moment to catch up with you. Oh, the reason why, Dave Wiest for the record, thank you for your question. This is to bring our regulations in line with federal regulations, which would be enforced anyway. So it's a clarity provision to assure that state law and federal law match.
Thank you.
Any additional questions in Carson City? Seeing none. Senator Krasner, do you have any questions? I'm seeing a no from Senator Krasner. Okay. I have a motion from Speaker Yeager to approve our 100-23 and a second from Vice Chair Harris. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing no opposition, R100-23 for the State Board of Pharmacy is hereby adopted unanimously. We have a second regulation, again, for early review, and that is proposed regulation R1013-24, which was also for the State Board of Pharmacy. So again, we will keep you, Mr. Weiss, from the State Board of Pharmacies to answer any questions on this early adoption regulation. Are there any questions here from folks in Las Vegas? And again, members, you have a copy of this regulation on your desks, and it is also available on the legislature's website under the items for this meeting. And I'm not seeing any questions here in Las Vegas. All right, we will move to Carson City. Any questions from members in Carson City?
No, there are none up here. Thank you.
Great. And Senator Krasner, I'm seeing a no from Senator Krasner. All right, with that, do I have a motion to approve our 013-24? I have a motion from Senator Stone, a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing no opposition, Regulation R013-24 for the State Board of Pharmacy is hereby adopted unanimously. And thank you, Mr. Weiss, for being here with us for these two items. As I mentioned earlier, we had those two items under our early review process for approval by the Commission. We also have 26 regulations submitted for consideration under item 3 today, and except for those two, these are submitted for approval pursuant to NRS 233B.067. We will sorry, yeah. We have all except two of those regulations are actually submitted for approval pursuant to 233B.067, and then there are two additional ones that are to be considered today that were deferred at a previous meeting and are being considered pursuant to NRS 233B.0675. These regulations are all contained in your notebooks, members, on your desks, and they are also posted on our legislature's website under the tab for this meeting, and you will find that tab by hitting the View Events button in the upper right-hand corner of that page again. And we also have public copies of those notebooks on the sign-in table at each end of the video conference, both here in Las Vegas and in Carson City. At this point in time, I will go over the regulations that I have already been asked to pull by members of the Commission, and then we will check to see if there are any additional regulations to be pulled for consideration. For those items that are pulled for additional conversation and consideration, we will ask the agencies to come up and address the members' concerns before deciding what action, if any, to take on these regulations. For those of you who are here on regulations that are not pulled for additional discussion, you are lucky because you will be able to go after this. So, members of the Commission, I have so far pulled for additional consideration R113-22 from the State Environmental Commission, R047-23 from the State Contractors Board, R069-23 for the Board of Medical Examiners, R073-23 for the State Board of Education, R080-23 for the State Board of Health, and R130-23 for the Administrator of the Employment Security Division of the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. I will start with members here in Las Vegas. Members, are there any additional regulations that you would like pulled for separate consideration in this list, other than those that I have already read? I'm not seeing any. We will move to Carson City. Are there any members who wish to have additional regulations pulled for separate consideration that were not already on the list that I have read?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have four. R036-23, R048-23, R066-23, and R128-23.
So I have R036-23 for the Department of Business and Industry, R048-23 for the State Contractors Board, R066-23 for the State Board of Health, and R128-23 for the Board of Wildlife Commissioners. And I see a nod from you, Senator
That's correct.
Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Any additional regulations from members in Carson City to be pulled?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to go over R110-23 and R144-23.
R110-23 is for the Department of Motor Vehicles, and R144-23 is for the State Board of Pharmacy. Okay, anyone else in Carson City? And I'm seeing Senator Krasner say she's good on pulling regulations. Okay. I'm going to go through the list one more time to make sure that I have all of the correct regulations pulled, and then we will go through each of these regulations in order. We will start, the first one pulled for consideration is R113-22 from the State Environmental Commission, R036-23 for the Department of Business and Industry, R047-23 for the State Contractors Board, R048-23 for the State Contractors Board, R066-23 for the State Board of Health, R069-23 for the Board of Medical Examiners, R073-23 for the State Board of Education, R080-23 for the State Board of Health, R110-23 for the Department of Motor Vehicles, R128-23 for the Board of Wildlife Commissioners, R130-23 for DETR, and R144-23 for the State Board of Pharmacy. Okay. With that, those regulations that I just recited will be those that we will pull for additional consideration. So if your name was on that list, you are going to hang out with us for just a bit longer. If your name was not on that list, then I would accept a motion to approve the remaining regulations that are listed on our agenda under item number 3 for approval by the Commission. I have a motion from Speaker Yeager. I have a second from Vice Chair Harris. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 All those opposed, say nay. Hearing no opposition, then the remaining regulations on our agenda under item number 3 will be approved and adopted by the Legislative Commission. And if you are waiting on those that were not read, you are free to go for today. I'm sure we will see you some other time. And we will begin the remaining review as folks are leaving us with our first regulation for consideration, which is R113-22 for the State Environmental Commission. And then I am going to turn this over once we get our folks. I see someone coming to the table in Carson City. So we'll let you get settled. And I'm going to turn it over to Senator Daly. I believe he had some questions on this one. And so Senator Daly, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm hoping my questions are just clarifying a few things that I wanted to make sure of. So I think in section 17 sub 3 and actually 33 sub 4, where it talks about an application must submit if they're going to cause degradation after they've gone through all of the alternatives and nothing's going to work, and it says that they can base their justification based on economic or social importance of the proposed discharge, et cetera. So I guess I was just looking for an example of what's going to justify the degradation of water quality, and how that actually works. And it just seems a difficult thing to justify. So I was curious. And I have other questions once we get done with that one.
Good afternoon. Danilo Dragoni, Deputy Administrator for the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. That's an excellent question. As far as we know, that such event has never occurred so far, so we don't have an example, but we know the process for which this kind of waiver will need to be accepted, and that would be through a submission to the State Environmental Commission. And so this kind of a waiver would go through the regular process of being publicly noticed, going through a formal hearing of the State Environmental Commissions with a public and stakeholders being able to participate to this process. But in terms of a clear example, we don't have any specific example, because it never happened so far.
And that's good news. Thank you. Is it basically a requirement that you have to have some alternative deal to match federal rules or some type of a thing like that? Or is it just within the state? Because I know a lot of, at least when I was reading this, is that a lot of this is standards and various things are set by the feds. And then the state overlaps most of that stuff. So they have a process similar to this, is why we have it in, because it's all blue language, it's new language. So I was just curious what the social or economic importance was to justify degradation of the water quality. But if it's a matching thing from the feds, or you have to have it for due process, I understand. I was just wanting to make sure.
For the record, Danilo Dragoni, it is a requirement from the federal to have this kind of a waiver in our regulations.
Very, very good. And I suspected that. I just wanted to make sure, and I'm glad there's no examples in Nevada, so that's good news. So second question, and I think both of these are related. In Section 18, it references that the director has certain authorities. And I'm assuming they're not unilateral, so it's like a preliminary, and then it's going to get approved by the board or the commission at some point further. Similar in Section 19, where the director has the ability to presume that it has to be then verified by the board at some point. I think that language is in Section 32. So just wanted to make sure that, so the powers that are kind of given to the director on some of this stuff on preliminary issues goes back to the full commission for verification or final approval.
We need a minute to, and I apologize, you said Section 18 and Section 19, correct? Danilo Dragoni, for the record.
Yeah, I believe in Section 18, it says that the director has certain authorities, I believe are the words. So are those unilateral? But I don't believe they are. But it doesn't say in that section. And then in Section 19, it says that the director shall presume when something comes in that it's legitimate or can be approved. And then I think in Section 32, it goes back and it says a determination by the commission, I think is in reference to both of those. I just wanted to make sure that that is the thread, that whatever authority the director has is not unilateral. He can make preliminary determinations, but it has to be verified and approved by the commission in the end.
Danilo Dragoni for the record. Thanks for the question. As far as we understand, Section 18 and Section 19, they describe part of the application and application review process, in which case, obviously, it will need to follow regulation, statutes, and federal regulation, but that would be a process that the department or the division would follow. I hope I answered your question.
I believe you did, and it's part of the application process, but there was just authority, discretion given to the director on certain things. But it does have to go through and either be verified instead of his presumption that it's all in order. So it's just going through the process on that. So my last question, if I can, Madam Chair, and it's just a question again out of curiosity, and it's part of existing language in Section 35, where it says where permits can be issued without an application, and then when the director deems it to be appropriate, and that's existing language, it's not new. So I was wondering if there's no application, how does that process work? How does the director know that there's a permit that needs to be issued without an application if he deems it to be appropriate? So how does that work in real life? If there's no application, how does the director find out about it? Is he just getting an email from a friend, or what happens? Because it really just doesn't seem like it's a very good process. I'm curious how it actually works in real life.
Danilo Dragoni for the record. I believe that part refers to a general permit, in which case it's the department or the division determining the need for a general permit, but then individual application related to the general permit will need to still to be submitted. So general permit is a permit that covers general situations. And it's a faster way to allow entities to then apply for a permit that meet those general conditions. So the department will define the general condition for the the general permit, but then application will still need to be submitted by the applicant to obtain the general permit.
And I see you put more language in from the existing right after that, if it is issued, that there's an additional process. I was just curious how does the director know to issue a general permit if there was no application? He just gets a phone call and says, oh, yeah, it's appropriate, go ahead. He has to have something to base that on. I was just curious, it's weirdly worded. I'm not saying we need to hold up this regulation over that, but maybe it's something you guys need to clarify for the future. That was all the questions I had, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any additional questions from members of the commission?
Yes, Chair,
I am not seeing.
I have a question.
Yes, Assemblyman, please.
So I kind of have more of a broader question about the intent of this regulation. The state has various water quality standards that relate to beneficial uses. But in this case, for dealing with the beneficial use of extraordinary ecological, aesthetic, or recreational values, you're choosing a non-degradation standard, which doesn't actually give a specific regulatory value to work with. It's by each segment or course of a river or a water body. Why is the department and the division taking that approach with this beneficial use versus, let's say, a drinking water standard, aquatic life standard, et cetera?
Hello, Jason Kuchnicki, for the record. I'm the chief of the Bureau of Water Quality Planning at Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. I would say that the extraordinary ecologic, aesthetic, or recreational value is a beneficial use that the commission can assign to a water body that they see fit. And the reason for that approach, that we're taking that approach, is that it is consistent with the Code of Federal Regulations, which requires consistency with the CFR. Our anti-degradation policy must be consistent. And so that is the highest. These are water bodies with extraordinary qualities, higher water quality, that must be maintained and protected. So it applies to the whole water body. It's simply a beneficial use that's designated to that water body.
Okay, I can understand that for water bodies in the state that are subject to, let's say, the Clean Water Act, which are very few, based on recent Supreme Court decisions. Most water bodies in the state, except for the Humboldt, the Colorado, the Carson, the Walker, and the Truckee, including Lake Tahoe, those are subject to federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act, but all the other water bodies aren't. So that justification, saying you're matching federal regulations for all water bodies in the state, is going farther than is necessary in regulating the state.
Danilo Dragoni, for the record. It is true indeed that we do have surface waters that are designated as a water of U.S. and water of the states. These regulations, however, apply to all of them. So my answer would be yes. These regulations apply to all the water of the states, including water of U.S. So the broad definition of extraordinary water, for short, would apply to all the water, all surface water of the states.
I understand that's the way the regulation's written. Your justification that you're doing it because the feds require it doesn't fit all water bodies. And so I'm not seeing a justification as to why you're regulating Cow Creek in the Diamond Range as a potential beneficial use that would fit these regulations. You're not providing me a justification as to why that's necessary. So that's my only point. Thank you.
Are we ready for a motion, Madam Chair?
I don't see any other questions, so yes, Senator.
Move to approve R113-22. Thank you.
I have a motion from Senator Daly for approval and a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
I have 2 nays, one from Assemblyman DeLong and one from Senator Stone. The motion carries. Our 113-22 for the State Environmental Commission is approved. We will move to the next item on our agenda for consideration, which is R036-23 for the Department of Business and Industry. I believe this one was a request from Senator Hansen, so we will let you get settled, and then Senator Hansen, when you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am ready. Is there somebody in Vegas, perhaps, that's here for business and industry?
We're getting ready down here.
Okay, there they are.
For the record, my name is Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. I'm an analyst in the Director's Office at Business and Industry.
Okay, I hope you can answer some of this. First of all, as I read the whole regulation, the main purpose of it sounds like, well, first of all, a real general overview. This mainly deals with tax credits and loans that you guys give to individuals, and now you want some kind of a, what I would call a clawback provision is what we're trying to do with this regulation?
No, that's what this regulation does is under the current program, what we do at the department level is we certify community development entities that apply for the ability to make what are called qualified equity investments. They're the ones that actually, we sort of color their money if they come in and they approve and are accepted and allocated a portion of the authorization we're given to certify, which in the past, two previous tranches of funding allocation have been $200 million. So what we do is we take that, we approve it. What the regulation does, the thing that Senate Bill 240 changed this in 2023 when it was passed, was it added what is called an impact qualified equity investment, which is a different, has different definitions attached to it. So the regulation had to be revised to incorporate impact qualified provisions. I can give you a sense of what that is, but essentially what an impact qualified equity investments are defined under federal tax code. And so what the impact qualified provision provides is that it essentially says it applies to qualified equity investments that are then limited to those businesses which have their principal business operations in Nevada, which has a definition under SB 240, which is 60% of your workforce is here. And then one of two things has to apply in addition to that. One is your primary business class, NAICS code, the North American Industry Classification System classification. NAICS code has to be either Sector 31, 32, 33, which is manufacturing in general, or 44, 45, which is retail trade. Or you have to be a business that has 51% or more of the ownership interest held by women, disabled veterans, persons who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, or members of a racial or ethnic minority group. So if one of those two and the principal business operations fits, the impact qualified provision would apply. There is $30 million in certification authority tied to that in SB 240. The rest is the $170 million is tied to the normal qualified. If it had all been qualified, we wouldn't be here for probably for the regulation change. But what this reg does is it simply takes all the standards that existed in the current program and modifies it to incorporate the impact qualified provision. It makes we took advantage of it to make a couple of changes. We extended the director's time for review by a few days. And then we incorporated a temporary regulation that had lapsed that just for the benefit of consistency in the program, we decided we would capture that and make sure it was made permanent. But that's all this does. The recapture provisions you may be referring to are standard in the program in new market tax credit programs, which were originally their federal program. And this is sort of Nevada's variant of it. And it's been in place since 2013. And as I mentioned earlier, we've had two previous tranches of funding in 2013 and 2019. And this would be the 2023 version, the third tranche. So.
Wow, thank you. I totally misread some of that then. What you call recapture, though, what I'm wondering, they mentioned loans and tax credits. Do you guys have some provision, because these are tax dollars one way or another, to recoup loans that go bad? I mean, how often do you have one that fails? And if it does, how do you guys, do you require bonding or something that they put up some collateral prior to giving them the loans or the tax credits?
The way it works is we actually don't provide any funding. The community development entities and they're federally certified through Treasury. They're the ones responsible for bringing in investors and others. So what you see in terms of the impact on the state budget is what's LCV calls negative revenue. So you'll see it in your the financial reports that there's a section on tax credits, and you'll see new market tax credits listed there, and it's usually a negative number. And so that depends on, okay, when the entities that are authorized the tax credits as part of those investment pools that they set up with the funding, when they apply for the tax credits and they're given it. So it shows up as a negative revenue. We're not putting any money up outside of that. And our only responsibility is to certify the original request for qualified equity investment authority, and then to monitor the performance to the investment standards of the program. The community development entities are the ones that are accountable for identifying the businesses, ensuring that they meet the federal standards for distressed and severely distressed census tracts, and essentially ensuring that we do require annual reports and certifications from the CDEs as to business compliance, and we ask for reporting on employment levels and things of that nature. And we provide a biannual report to the LCB, which is required under the original statute, and we recently submitted the and it occurs in even numbered years, so we just submitted our 2024 report in early March. So that provides sort of an overview of the program, how the tax credits break out under the current 2019 tranche of funding. There have been in the 2013 funding, and that was, and just for reference, I've been handling this for about 2 years, so it sort of predates me, but I know there were a few businesses that do go bad and that basically closed down. But the way that works in terms of this is, as I understand it, is inherent in the way the CDEs will structure the investments. Many of these, they typically follow 3 different types. One's a hybrid of the other 2. But one's based what's called a put-call structure. It's based on this put-call theorem. It gets into some pretty interesting financial engineering, but anyhow, it works. So they do that. And then another one's like a loan structure. And the put-call structure basically set up initial investment, and it stays for the entire length of the program until it's wound up at the end. And then the equity is released to the business, and it's all done. If something goes bad there, it's up to the CDE to sort of deal with the business. If there's any failure to meet the standards of the federal or state standards for the investments, there could be what's called a recapture. We've never had a recapture under the program. The recapture would be we'd go out and you'd recapture the tax credits. Department of Taxation is the one that once the allocations are made and certified, they take that, and then the applications for the tax credits go to taxation. If there were to be a recapture incident, we would go through them to recapture from the investment pools as CDEs. CDs have a vested interest in not having a recapture. It affects their standing with Treasury and their ability to get future funding. There's federal new market tax credits that are released to CDEs every year, sizable amounts of money in the billions of dollars. So they have a vested interest in ensuring their businesses tend to do well. Most of ours have done reasonably well. And again, the biannual report sort of provides a nice overview of that.
Could you repeat that for me? I missed a couple parts of it. No, that was very detailed. Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm talking to the right person. I thought it was business and industry. We got the feds involved. We got a million different people involved in this thing. The one last thing that I want to ask you is on page 15. I think it's you guys. Maybe it's the feds. I'm not sure. But you're required to identify, as part of Nevada law, if I think you said if 51% of the business has to be woman, disabled veteran, person who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, or member of a racial or ethnic minority group. If it's 51%, I mean, do you guys audit that? How do you determine if somebody is lesbian, gay, bisexual? I mean, is there a form where you actually ask people their sexual orientation or the percentage that exists in a business so that they can qualify?
No, we would not do that. That standard would, it'll probably be a form of self-certification, I'm guessing, but it'll be handled via the CDE, or in this case, it can be under the impact qualified, it can be a Nevada lender. They don't necessarily have to be federally certified, but they do have to meet the principal business operations standard. And we will be going through, assuming the regulation is approved, we will be moving forward with the next stage in this, which is to actually set up the application process for the certification and allocation of the funds, the $170 million according to the usual qualified equity investment standards, and then the $30 million for this new portion, which is the impact qualified. But we would not directly do that. That would be through the CDEs and the entities doing the investments in the businesses themselves. As I said, similar to the qualified, the CDEs are federally certified, and then they're required to certify to us both their continued compliance, and they are audited. It's sort of optional if they want to submit their audits to us, but they do certify that, and then they're accountable for ensuring the businesses maintain their standards. And we do work with them in situations where there may be an issue, like there's some complex standards with affiliates. There's certain minimum percentages that have to be in distressed or severely distressed census tracts in terms of your overall equity investment allocation and things of that nature. And we work with them to ensure that those are maintained, but we don't directly audit or do those things, and I would not anticipate that with this new provision.
All right. Well, it sounds like I need to talk to whoever the CDE person is, but I'm just curious as to how you actually have some sort of an audit process to ensure that if we're going to state in the Nevada law that these businesses to qualify have to be at least 51%, all these various categories, but you said it's self-reporting. There is no form that says, is Ira Hansen one of these categories, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, whatever the various things are? Is there any form anywhere in that whole litany of agencies and people you're talking about where they actually ask that specific question so you can determine whether or not a business has 51% of all these various categories?
Well, in terms of that specific requirement, which again is one of two options relative to the main one, is that they'll have to have principal business operations in Nevada. But in terms of that, we've developed a preliminary application draft that we're going to be running through legal. Assuming the regulation gets approved, we'll move forward with developing the application forms. One of the questions we anticipate asking of anybody who's interested in applying for the impact qualified portion is their record of having investments in these types of businesses, in terms of the 51% requirement and those particular groups, if they have a history of investing in those and providing evidence of that. So that's contemplated as part of the application process, but we're still working on that element of it. And in terms of dealing with the entities that may be interested, I'm sure we'll probably fine tune that as we move forward. But at this point, I don't see us, the Department of Business and Industry, auditing or doing anything directly to confirm that outside of working as we have with our CDEs and the entities that will be actually doing the investments to ensure they have the processes in place to do those things.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm totally confused on a whole bunch of this stuff, but it was very detailed. I'm very uncomfortable with that part of it, especially having you guys supposedly identifying people by your own thing. You haven't written the standards to how you're going to do that. Madam Chair, I know normally you'd like well, I don't know, maybe somebody else has some questions, but normally you would like a recommendation to passage, but I'm voting no on this one. I'm very uncomfortable with that language in that part of the regulation. So I realize I may be the lone wolf on this, but I'm not supporting this one. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any additional questions from members of the commission? Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to follow up on my colleague's comments. So you're basically saying that you don't really vet if somebody was to say that I should be a part of that group because I'm LGBT. Is this providing an opportunity for people to get loans just by claiming that they are? Maybe they aren't. Is there an element of fraud involved? Or we're dealing with public funds, right?
Well, you are dealing with tax credits and negative revenue. I don't think so. In terms of the past experience with how we've dealt with our community development entities and the processes they've used, we do request information from them. They do provide it. They do certify these things to us. To the extent possible, we deal with, we will talk to businesses. We don't do formal audits. We don't have budget for that. So in terms of, it's relatively hands-off, but it's not completely hands-off. And in terms of the certification as to minority status, there are SBA standards and other things that I would assume the CDs and lenders will be using to verify some of this. And then some of the other categories where there may not be a specific federal certification tied to that, I'm sure we'll be open to suggestions from the parties that are doing it as to how best to do that. But again, our principal focus is the Nevada business operations. And personally, we'd like to see more in terms of the NAICS codes, the manufacturing and the retail trade. And I suspect we'll probably get, but I don't know, we'll probably get more applications via those areas than the other. But, women-owned, you can get certified for women-owned, you get certified for veteran-owned, you can get certified. So I would imagine some of that is going to be the standard by which the lenders proceed with dealing with a business that has that as the option for applying for the impact qualified.
But wouldn't you agree that some of those criteria are much more transparent and documented? Getting into somebody's sexual orientation is not something that maybe they would even want to broadcast or is documented someplace. They could just say that I'm LGBT just to be a part of that 51% and get a loan. I share the same concerns that Senator Hansen has, is that you could have people that fraudulently are getting loans just by claiming that they are, when maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And I just don't see any way you can audit that. Thank you.
We've talked a little bit about basically what amounts to, in its purest form, tax fraud if people were applying for tax credits through the government but not meeting the criteria or submitting falsified information, which I believe, and legal counsel can correct me if I am wrong, would certainly fall within the purview of the Department of Justice to investigate, and or the Attorney General's office in their various bureaus, not the least of which would be consumer protection, if somebody were potentially submitting falsified tax documents and committing tax fraud here in Nevada. And I'm happy to be corrected if I have maybe misspoken, but that would be my educated guess. Mr. Fernley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, you'd be correct. If there was an entity that was committing fraud to obtain these types of investments, there would be, because this has both federal funds attached to it and state money attached to it, there would be the potential for either the federal government to be looking at the use of its tax credits, and the state attorney general or any sort of law enforcement agency in the state to investigate that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Fernley. And I guess I'll just add my own comment to this, that as a former prosecutor, there are only protections that we can put in place to address and to hopefully deter criminal conduct. I would certainly hope that, like so many other businesses who get tax credits and promise to do things like hire Nevadans and comply with certain standards and bring certain revenue, that we would be able to hold these other businesses accountable, and that there should not be a differentiation between the qualifications for obtaining and or applying for and or being qualified for obtaining tax credits, and feel confident that the prosecutors within our Attorney General's office and also the federal government would be able to do their jobs along with their law enforcement agencies to discern when there is fraud taking place and hopefully take appropriate action. In my view, that's not a reason to deny this regulation. We put all sorts of parameters on tax credits that then we would have the ability to follow up on. Are there additional questions from members of the commission?
Madam Chair, I have a question for legal.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you. If I applied for a business and I listed myself as bisexual, number one, wouldn't there have to be a form that I would have to fill out to describe my sexual orientation? First of all, which I think is a huge invasion of privacy. But let's say I put it down as bisexual. Could Brian tell me what standard they would use to prosecute me and to prove that I was not bisexual?
I certainly don't know what kind of facts would be presented by that, in a specific case like that. There would be federal agents that could investigate, state agents that could investigate, look at documents, interview witnesses. As far as my understanding of this process that's been described is the state is, the investments in the businesses are made by community development entities that are certified by the United States Department of the Treasury. So those are the entities that actually go out and make investments or make loans to the businesses. So they're registered with the Department of Treasury, and certainly if they weren't doing their job right, the Department of Treasury would also come and investigate. And I don't know what evidence they would look at. I don't know what the community development entities ask of these businesses, but there would be layers of enforcement options if there was some sort of fraud going on.
Okay, well, let's assume that I commit fraud. I write bisexual. At that point, they have a right then to examine my entire sex life, do they not? And also, as the chair pointed out, are we talking criminal law here? Because if you're violating the tax codes of the federal government, that can get pretty serious and pretty ugly. I'm just kind of wondering what are the forms or whatever that you have to fill out that they could come and say, Mr. Hansen committed perjury, because in our opinion, in his 63 years of life, he's never done anything that would qualify as a homosexual act. But he claims that he has. The burden of proof there is so high, and the ability for them to actually prove beyond a reasonable doubt, or even to a standard of 49-51, how do they do that without getting into extremely personal questions of the people that are applying for these loans? Like myself, a small businessman, I go to apply one of these, federal, whatever they are, and not have an incredible invasion of people's personal privacy issues. None of the damn government's business what I've done sexually. And now I can actually get a loan by claiming to have done something sexual. Maybe I never did. Totally fraudulent. But how do you prove that? And secondly, why would we want the government asking questions like that in a loan application process? I would like to, we've gone really, really crazy on the whole sexual stuff. I'm very much a believer that whatever you do is your own business. But now we're going to have the government coming in and coming to a plumbing business who wants to get a business loan to operate in a minority community or whatever. And now I have to fill out a form in which I have to claim to qualify that I have some sort of sexual whatever. None of the government's damn business. So anyway, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I've probably beat this one long enough, but I'm very uncomfortable with the direction that we are taking in the state of Nevada on regulations and, frankly, the Nevada revised statutes that we passed with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And again, I would remind everybody, these tax credits are something that someone would have to apply for, not something that the government is subjecting you to. Are there any other questions for the Department of Business and Industry on this regulation, or do I have a motion? I do have a motion from Speaker Yeager and a second from Vice Chair Harris. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
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 I have a nay from Senator Stone, Senator Hansen, and Assemblyman DeLong. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Motion carries.
Chair,
Sorry, go
Chair,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Assemblywoman Hanson, I just got in from Education Interim. Sorry for being
Yes.
tardy. Caught
No,
the
you're
tail
fine.
end of the conversation, and so, yeah, I'm a no. Thank you.
Okay, and we also have a nay from Assemblywoman Hansen. The motion does carry. Regulation R036-23 will be approved. Thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you, Assemblywoman, for being with us. I know you've had a very long day in interim education and now are joining us, but luckily we still have several regulations to go through, so you haven't missed much. We will take the next two items together. We have R047-23 for the State Contractors Board and R048-23 for the State Contractors Board. And I mean that we'll hear those sort of simultaneously since they're both for the same entity. We'll start with R047-23. And I believe that one was a request from Senator Daly. So Senator Daly, we will turn it over to you. Once we have finished the discussion on R047-23, we'll move to the next regulation, R048-23. So Senator Daly, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, again, just clarifying questions, just wanted to understand the intent. First one is in Section 8. I was just curious about the timeline, and I know it can all be defeated in that first sentence there, where a motion unless made at a hearing. So if they don't want to do any of it, they can just do it at a hearing. And then I went back and looked at 622A 360 and the types of motions, but I don't think it's relevant. So they have to do it 20 days before the hearing is scheduled. So I'm assuming there's going to be notice of the hearing more than 20 days, so they can do that. And if it wasn't, they would be limited. They'd have to only make it at the hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. T. Grimmer with the Farrar Group representing the Nevada State Contractors Board. We also have on Zoom Ms. Broyley Kamesk from the Contractors Board for more technical questions, which this may be one of them. It certainly won't be as interesting as the last issue, though. So as Senator Daly referenced, this portion of the reg only applies to a very limited number types of motions that are listed in 622A 360. And actually in that statute, there are also timelines put into place of when the filings need to be made and responses to those motions. And honestly, these are actually more generous than what's in 622. So yeah, I do believe that the 20 days would be partly so that we have the time to notice the issue onto a hearing to comply with the open meeting law. So it's the 20 days before the hearing to ask for the motion, and then 14 days to respond. And then if the person wants to then also file written comments, then it would be 2 days prior to the hearing so that the members have the ability to read the documentation and make a ruling at the hearing.
And understood. If it's,
that helps.
Thank you. If it's more generous than what might be in 622A, I just was doing the math. You got 20 days, 14 to respond. That leaves 6, and then you only would have then 4 days to do a reply brief if you wanted. And if those are all within the timelines, I was just making sure that there was time to do that. And I understand this isn't in front of the full board. That's a different process. This is on what's the commission? I know it's a commission on education or whatever the heck it is. That correct?
Misty Grimmer, for the record, I think this, and of course, staff can weigh in if I'm wrong, but I believe these are issues that come in front of the full board. I think the other section that you and I are going to talk about is in reference to the Commission on Construction Education, but I think these are all of the issues that that are listed in 622A. So, and the 2 days, it would appear to me that the 2 days is the time frame for submitting a written response
Understood.
prior to the hearing.
So, and that's where maybe I was not reading it correctly, because when I get to section 8, subsection 6, this is existing language. It says if the board or its designee wishes to oppose a motion, the board or its designee is not required to serve or file a written response on the motion. That's where I was leaning or thinking that the board would then notify the Commission on Construction Education that they oppose whatever motion is in front of that board. If I'm reading it wrong, let me know. But the question either way is, so if the board is opposed to the motion, how and when are they telling the rest of the parties? If they don't have to serve it and they don't have to put it in writing, they're just saying, I don't like it, no reason, no opportunity to respond, unless I'm reading it incorrectly.
So again, I think I may need to phone a friend if Ms. Worthy-Kamesh is on to clarify exactly which types of motions this would apply to.
Yes, thank you. Susan Worley-Kamesh, Nevada State Contractors Board. This does not apply to the Commission on Construction Education. The Commission on Construction Education only hears grants for applicants who, grant applications for people who want to receive money for construction education. So this does not apply to that. This only applies to disciplinary actions and new license applications, or the hearing process in front of the full board or an administrative law judge.
Okay, so if the board or its designee wishes to oppose a motion and they don't have to serve it or give any type of written response, how are the parties, when and how are the parties notified? And I know that's existing language, but it seems to be a flaw in how it works. If you're trying to be transparent, open, fair, and if they want to put in a motion, the other party, I'm not assuming it's always going to be the board, then it can do a response and a reply. Where's the board? Are they a third party in this? Are they the other party? Or when do they have to comply with some of this stuff so that people have fair processes? Because, I've had some issues with the board sometimes.
Yeah. Susan Broyley-Kamish in the Nevada State Contractors Board. We do have statutory requirements for service before we have to provide due process for all of our denial hearings or our disciplinary matters. So we do provide 30 days notice by U.S. mail for those matters. So this is just clarifying language in which somebody could oppose a motion to continue, let's say.
Okay, like I said, I don't think we're ready to hold this up or anything. It just may be a conflicting deal. If there's other provisions that says you have to provide notice to the parties if you're objecting to some motions, maybe it just applies to the few that are in that 622. So the other question that I had in section 9, and I think you guys were trying to clarify some things, but I don't know that it is. And now this is talking about the commission. Regular meetings held at the principal office or other place the commission may specify. And then the principal office of the commission is located at the office of the board. Is it printed somewhere where the principal office of the board is? Is it the Las Vegas location? Is it the Northern Nevada location? Is it the Elko location or any of the other sub-offices that you guys might have? How are people supposed to know where the principal office of the board is?
Misty Grimmer for the record. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Susan.
Susan Broyley-Kamish, Nevada State Contractors Board. The office of the board is in Reno, so the bottom line is we would accept that at either office. We have an office in Reno, we have an office in Las Vegas, and the majority of the work of the Commission on Construction Education happens by email. So we would also accept that by email, which could be in either office as well. So this is actually more broad than it was previously.
So there's more than one principal board, I guess. So wherever you guys receive it, if it's an office of the board, you're going to get it to the right people. Because if the issue is in, or the people are in Las Vegas, they may be sending it to the location on the board, but you say it's primarily by email. I didn't know if it made it clear or not. That was my only other question. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can make a motion when you're ready.
Any additional questions from members of the commission? Hearing none, Senator Daly, is that a motion to approve?
Yeah, move to approve R047-23, and I hope it works out for them.
Okay. And I have a motion from Senator Daly, a second from Speaker Yeager, and well wishes on implementation. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. R047-23 will be adopted, and we will move to R048-23, also for the State Contractors Board. I believe this one was a request from Senator Hansen, so we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, my question is real simple. All the Contractors Board is doing in this is essentially making it more easy to get your initial license, it sounds like. When I got my license back in 1986, I had to pay, I remember it was $15,000 was my limit. So it's been a while. Question I've got, though, is when I got mine way back when I was just starting out, I thought I was required to have a bond. I mean, the one thing that happens with a lot of startup contractors especially, I don't know what the percentage is, but from the first year to about the first 5 years, they have a very high rate of going out of business. Is there something in this regulation that exists now that protects the public so they can go back and make a claim against the bond if these kind of new startup contractors go out of business?
Susan Borley-Camish, the Nevada State Contractors Board. We, all licensees are required to put a bond, either a surety bond or a cash bond. We have extra layers of protection now in place for residential contractors as well. So yes, all contractors must present a bond before we will issue them a license. Additionally, if a contractor were to go out of business and leave homeowners with unfinished projects, those homeowners could claim on our residential recovery fund if it was residential work. So there are multiple avenues for homeowners to be made whole.
Excellent. I just want to double check because that wasn't defined in this regulation. So if that's the case, I'd be happy to make a motion, Madam Chair, if nobody else has any questions.
Any questions from members of the commission? Hearing and seeing none, I have a motion to approve from Senator Hansen, a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. R048-23 for the State Contractors Board will be adopted. We will next hear R066-23 from the State Board of Health. And immediately following that one, we will take a regulation out of order because it is also for the State Board of Health, and it is R080-23. So we will begin with R066-23. And I believe this was also a request from Senator Hansen. So once we are settled there in Carson City, Senator Hansen, whenever you are ready.
Good afternoon, ladies. You ready? All right, real quick. I noticed what I did. I went through the small business impact portion of your thing, and there was a lot of complaints from the people that you're going to be regulating. So a couple of preliminary questions, though. Is the money, the 6% money, going to be put into a separate account that is then used exclusively for the cancer screening stuff that you guys were talking about?
Good afternoon. Andrea Oguchi for the record, AUNDREA OGUSHI with DPBH, accompanied by Kagan Griffin. And yes, correct. The money will be allocated into a different account, and that 6%, those 6% fees are essentially only to serve the Nevada Central Cancer Registry.
Good. Now, of that 6%, what dollars are you guys estimating that? What is the revenue amount that you guys estimate that's going to bring in?
Andrea Gucci for the record. So based off of projections for fiscal year 24 and 25, there was an estimated amount of 100,000 for, I apologize, a little dyslexic here, $1,445, $388, and that is based off projections, not actuals, because the renewal and issuance does change and vary, so it's, we have to wait until after everyone has done their registration.
Okay, no, I was just trying to get a figure here. The other thing that they complained a great deal about in the small business impact statement was the fact that the larger businesses apparently aren't being taxed as 6% on the equipment that they are using. Is that true? And if that is true, why don't you guys go after the big hospitals and so forth that use this exact same type of equipment?
I apologize. Andrea Gucci. So we are taxing the bigger facilities. It is required by law that we do a small business impact statement to assure, that the impact on smaller businesses won't, put them out of business essentially. But hospitals and larger facilities will be taxed the same. The 6% fee is based off of the issuance or renewal of any radiation machine based off of NRS. And so it applies to everyone. And
good. Well, okay, that eliminates my concerns, and because that was a small business impact complaint, was that, hey, why aren't you going after the big guys? And you are going after the big guys. Everybody's being treated equally with the 6% figure. That's what you're saying, correct? Very good. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions from members of the commission? I am not seeing any. I would accept a motion to approve. Senator Hansen, if you're willing to make that motion.
I will make the motion that we approve R066-23.
Great. And I have a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. R066-23 for the State Board of Health will be adopted. We will next move to R080-23, also for the State Board of Health, and I believe this was a request from Senator Daly. And so we will turn it over to you.
We're on 069, right?
Nope, 080-23.
Did we skip over 69?
We did because we're still with the State Board of Health. So rather than have them come up and then leave and then come up again, we're going to move to R080-23 so they can take one chance at the witness table.
Okay. I just had to look at my notes. I was looking at the other one. Sorry. Thank you. So where we're, if I'm remembering this correctly, we're saying only if its water is bottled or purified or manufactured here in the state is the only time they have to provide certain information in order to sell it in the state. But if it's manufactured out of state, they no longer have to, you claim, is duplicative in the reasoning for the regulation. So I just wanted to make sure that other states that are theoretically doing this, is there a federal standard? Are they meeting at least the requirements that they would have to do for resale in the state? I know it's your job to help protect the public and all that kind of stuff. So how are we meeting the Nevada requirements, or are they greater or equal to under some federal overarching regulation? Because we wouldn't want to have a standard in, I don't know what state I want to pick on, Oklahoma, that was less than ours is, and so people picked Oklahoma to go and do the manufacturing because they don't have to meet as many requirements.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is Teresa Hayes, Teresa, last name Hayes. I'm the Environmental Health Program Manager for the Nevada Division of Public and Behavioral Health. Nevada is only one of 2 states in the nation who require out-of-state and international bottled water to be permitted specifically for the state of Nevada. Everybody has to meet the federal standard across the United States. So what we're doing is relinquishing regulation in compliance with the Governor's Executive Order 203-03 to regulate businesses when a regulation becomes outdated and creates conflict. This is absolutely regulated at the federal level, and it is regulated at state level under NAC 446. For food establishments, bottled water is still a food. So we have all of the regulations necessary to regulate them no matter where the bottled water was bottled.
And that was just what I wanted to confirm, have on the record for everybody's sake, is that there's no public safety issues. We're giving this up, streamlines a few things, but the water and the quality and all of that's regulated at the federal level. Doesn't matter which state it came from. So we're all in the same boat.
No.
So let's hope the feds are doing a good job.
Yeah, this is Teresa Hayes again for the record. That is absolutely true. Are there any more questions?
That was it, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Any additional questions from members of the commission? I am not seeing or hearing any. Senator Daly, do you have a motion to approve R080-23?
Yes, I would move to approve R08-0-23. Thank you.
We have a motion from Senator Daly and a second from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. R080-23 will be adopted. Okay, that brings us to, we're going to go back to our place in the regulations. We are going to hear R069-23 for the Board of Medical Examiners. And I believe that this one was another request from Senator Daly. So once we get someone with us, Senator Daly, you can feel free to begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Board of Medical Examiners. We should have Sarah Bradley on the Zoom, who is our resident expert that can answer these questions.
Yep, Sarah Bradley, Deputy Executive Director for the Board.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And this is the last one that I have today, anyway. So I guess, and you can tell me, because I don't know, I'm looking at this regulation by itself. So my issue is Section 26. And I just think the whole section is unfair, right? So it goes on this premise. So if the board or any committee, investigative committee, goes forward and investigates a complaint, whatever, and there's concerns over whatever the issue may be, it says that the anesthesiologist, or anesthesiologist assistants, could be anesthesiologists as well, I think, that they would have to submit to a mental and physical examination, and that they consent to that regardless, otherwise you don't give them the license. So when they accept the license, they are forced to accept that consent, otherwise you don't get the license. So I guess some of the questions, and I think that it's just inherently unfair on that, is that if they want this mental or physical deal, you also say at the end of Section 26 is that they have to submit in order to get their license, and they have to pay for this examination, which is not for their benefit, but for somebody else's benefit. I think that's just inherently unfair. And then you say nothing about who gets to pick the provider, nothing about a second opinion. If I've got to pay, I'm going to pick the provider, not you. So I think that the whole section is just inherently unfair. I know in every other area of my previous life doing some stuff, we would never allow that type of stuff. If the company wants an examination or a second opinion or approval that you're capable to perform your work before you come back to work, it's always at the company's expense. In this case, it would be at the board's expense. So if you can, satisfy me that that's fair and equitable and the right direction to go, I'd like to hear it.
Sure. Sarah Bradley, Deputy Executive Director here for the record. So first of all, just to clarify, these regulations apply only to anesthesiologist assistants. With one exception, there is something that was added regarding physician assistants. So this does not, this provision you're talking about is only for anesthesiologist assistants. That being said, this same provision is in the Nevada revised statutes for the other license types of the board. So physicians have to have this same requirement. The wording is nearly identical. Physician assistants also have the same wording in the regulations, other regulations the board has. The same requirement is there for practitioners of respiratory care and perfusionists. So all 4 of the board's other license types have this virtually same requirement, same wording. Before I worked for the Nevada State Board of Medical Examiners, I've been there just over about 4.5 years. I worked at the Attorney General's office for 12.5 years, working with licensing boards. This is common language that I saw, at least with my licensing board clients. Because there can be a situation when a complaint comes in and the investigating body, whichever entity that is concerned about that person's ability to safely practice. And that's why this is there. In my 16.5 years working in this area, I've probably only seen maybe 10 times total that we've done this. With the entities I've worked with, it's not a super common thing. I've seen it more at the medical board in 4 years, maybe 1 a year, 2 a year max. So I guess, and the reason that it's paid for by the licensee is 622-400 says that the licensee is basically to pay the cost of an investigation if something, if there's a finding. But again, this is paid for, in all of the other provisions, it's something paid by the licensee. And the reason is, if we have the board pay for it, then all of the other licensees are paying for it. So the question is, what's more fair? Is it more fair for the licensee that we have a complaint about, that we're curious may not be, or concerned, concerned may not be competent? Is it more fair for them to pay for the exam or all of the licensees in total? So it should everyone pay, or the person that we're actually having evaluated? At least so far, with regard to the Nevada revised statutes, the legislature has said the licensee being examined should pay. And so that's where this language came from and what I modeled it after. I hope that answers the question.
Partially. So what I got from that is that you're universally unfair. I didn't read those other regulations before, or I would have had the same questions, I'm sure. Whether the individual or the other licensees would have to pay. It's a matter of who is receiving the benefit of the final report. That person should pay, right? So who's ordering the report, et cetera, et cetera. So you didn't answer the question about who picks the provider. Are you allowed to get a second opinion? So who picks the provider?
Sarah Bradley, Deputy Executive Director for the record. The benefit of the report is for the public, and I'm sorry if I didn't clarify that. So it's not actually for the board. The board's acting on behalf of the public. That's the belief anyway. As far as who picks it, usually it depends on the agency. For our agency at the medical board, the investigative committee, which is made up of 2 physicians and 1 public member, they would select someone usually from a list that we already have. But sometimes it's something we negotiate with the licensee depending on location. So do they want to go to Las Vegas? Where do they want to have the exam done? And we try to find a provider close to them. So I guess I'd say it's a bit of a negotiation with the licensee to determine what works for them based on the list of approved people we have.
Understood. Is there an option for a second opinion? And before you do that, just so if you're doing it on behalf of the public and the board is doing this for the benefit of the public and you're the entity, so essentially you're the public. In my view, when you say that statement, I think it's the board's responsibility, but we can argue over that. So is there opportunity for a second opinion?
Sarah Bradley, Deputy Executive Director for the record. Again, that's something that can be negotiated. So what I've seen most frequently, if there's concerns from these reports, usually the person doing the evaluation makes a recommendation for, maybe some training, whatever it might be. So usually the report isn't, we don't ever want you to work again. It's, hey, I have concerns regarding this and this regarding the person. So again, a lot of times it ends up being a negotiation where the person agrees to do whatever the recommended things are so that the public is safe. Again, we have to have a consumer complaint or a referral from another agency indicating there's a problem before we would even do this. So it's not just anyone. And the concern we have has to be related to, gosh, maybe we should have them evaluated. Sometimes it's a substance abuse evaluation. That's probably the most common. And again, the goal there really is to get them healthy and working, get them on the right path. Again, sorry, I hope that answers the question.
Understood. I just don't agree with the section, and I won't be supporting this.
Additional questions from members of the commission? I am hearing none. I have a motion to approve from Speaker Yeager. I do have a second from Senator Stone. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, I have one nay from Senator Daly. The motion does carry. Our 069-23 for the Board of Medical Examiners will be approved and adopted. Our next item on the agenda is our 073-23 for the State Board of Education. And so we will let you get settled, and then I am going to turn it over to Assemblywoman Backus.
Good afternoon, Lisa Ford from the Nevada Department of Education for the record, and I'm joined in the north by my colleagues from the state-sponsored Charter School Authority, Executive Director Melissa McAdin, and Director of Authorizing Dr. Katie Broughton.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm not sure probably who's the proper person to answer this. But when I was taking a look at this proposed regulation, specifically the changes sought for the change in sponsorship, that in addition for the requirement of a rating of a certain charter school at a level to be transferred, the sponsorship to be transferred, there's some allowance making it a little more broad by the request for a change in sponsorship if approved by the current sponsor of the charter school. And I understand that NRS 388A.231 gives the board broad discretion in making regulations for the change of sponsorship. But where I struggle is when I took a look at the justification for the change, it cited to AB 400. And so I took a look at AB 400, and under AB 400, Section 32, subsection 4, when we're looking at, and for those that are listening that may just not be familiar with that bill, and specifically those provisions, that is where we're bringing in the cities and counties to serve as sponsors of charter schools. But under Section 32, subsection 4, in there, it provides that the application must be approved by the department for that change, and it only allows, when you look further into the bill, that that the city or county can become a sponsor only in situations where we are transferring sponsorship and not in a situation where there is a new charter school coming on. But then when I looked back at this, where I was struggling is in the proposed regulation, subsection 5, anticipates that the application is being submitted to the proposed sponsor for approval. So I was really confused if this is just something new, why this was necessary, if it was just for that purpose of a transfer and sponsorship for city and county, that would only have to be approved by the department. So if you can kind of help me understand that, that would be great.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. My name is Dr. Katie Broughton. I'm the Director of Author for the State Public Charter School Authority. Completely reasonable question. It's a very confusing web. So the Nevada Department of Education is the approval of the charter school sponsors. So if a city or a county wants to apply to be a sponsor, they apply to the Nevada Department of Education. If the Nevada Department of Education approves them, they then would become a charter school sponsor. Currently, the only sponsors are the SPCSA, and several of the school districts within the state. What this regulation does is it's not about the sponsors, but rather the schools. So currently, if there's a school that's rated 1 or 2 stars on the star rating, the NSPF, they cannot apply to change sponsors. But this regulation would provide the mechanism for those schools to change sponsors. So it's a little different than applying to the department to become a sponsor, but rather allows a school that has a 1 or 2 star rating to potentially apply to change sponsors. Hopefully that helps to clarify.
I think it does. And so basically, really, the change is being sought under the authority of NRS 388A.231 and not really under AB 400. I think that's where I was getting waylaid by this. Was I was so fixated on this new city and county that requiring that the department can just approve it. So I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that correctly. I actually have a follow-up with that. So then, I think it was kind of a rhetorical question, if I was understanding that correctly, that it's not necessarily based on this AB 400 per se. I got it correct from the young lady here in Las Vegas.
Lisa Ford for the record. Yes, you are correct.
Okay, thank you. And then, so now my question would be, is why are we changing, or why are you changing the policy from just the limited, the permission to change for the charter schools from those, I guess it's like broadening it, and I'm just curious why it is necessary to broaden that from just limited, that requirement when a charter school is rated first, second, or third highest, to just basically approval by the current sponsor.
Melissa McAdin for the record, Executive Director for the State Public Charter School Authority. Essentially, as the landscape changes in Nevada and new entities potentially come on to authorize charter schools like cities, municipalities, we can see scenarios where it might be in the best interest of a school that was recently rated as a 2-star, but is located within a certain municipality, to change sponsorships. I'm going to try to think of a good example for you. Let's say the city of North Las Vegas, this is all hypothetical. The city of North Las Vegas says, we want to sponsor charter schools. They get approved by the Nevada Department of Education. They have a facility that they want to give to a charter school to use free of charge. They're going to pay for it, but they want that school to be in their portfolio. They want to be the authorizer of that school. It would probably be in the best interest of the students in that school for us to allow them to change sponsorship, because now instead of putting 15% of their per pupil dollars towards facilities, this city is going to allow them to use their facility free of charge, and that money goes directly into the classrooms to the benefit of students. So that's just one example, but there's all different kinds of unique scenarios that could present themselves, why it would be a good idea to just make it a little more lenient, I guess. And again, it's important to recognize that the existing sponsor is signing off on that as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm all done, Madam Chair, with my questions.
Additional questions, I believe. Senator Daley, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And with the discussion that we just had, I wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly. So the way I understood it was before is that a charter school could request to change sponsors if they were a 1 or a 2 in the rating system. And the previous sponsor didn't really have any say. They could request that, and it didn't require their approval. So they didn't have a veto power, if you will.
Melissa McAdam for the record. No, it's a little bit confusing. Previously, if you were a 1 or 2 star school, you could not change sponsor. Even if you wanted to and the other sponsor wanted you and your current sponsor didn't want you anymore, right? Like there was no mechanism for them to, there currently is no mechanism for them to change sponsorship at all.
If you're a 1 or a 2.
If you're a 1 or a 2 star school.
So you could change before if you were a 3 or 4 or 5.
Yes.
And now with the use of the word "or," how does that work? So now does the current sponsor have total control? They can say, "I'm going to let you go. I'm not going to let you go." Would it create a disparity that they could say, "No, we're going to not allow the 1s and 2s, but we're going to dump all the 3, 4s, and 5s we can"? I'm kidding, but would it allow that?
No, so it requires just a 1 or 2 star school to have the approval of the sponsor, not a 3, 4, or 5 star school.
So the 3, 4, or 5s, no change for them. They can do whatever they want to.
Correct.
But, okay. Would still require approval of the original sponsor who could say, "No, we're not going to let you go." That's where it's not "and," it's "or."
Yeah,
So
no.
either they meet the qualifications the way it was before and they can move, or
Right. So if it's a
they
3,
need approval.
yeah, if it's a 3, 4, or 5 star school, they would not need approval from the original sponsor. Only a 1 or 2 star school would need approval from the original sponsor.
So that language about the original or the current sponsor is being added. So there was no opportunity, zero, nada, for a 1 or 2 school to be able to move.
That's correct.
So why didn't we change it where you don't have veto power of the current sponsor only on a 1 or a 2? Seems to me if I was, playing the game and wanted to, I'll get rid of all the 3, 4s, and 5s I want, but I'm not going to get rid of any 1s or 2s. Why would we give the current sponsor that type of veto power?
Melissa McAdam for the record. I think the reason that we would allow a 3, 4, and 5 star school, they're meeting standards. All of those schools are meeting standards. So they have the ability to come and go, I guess, from sponsor to sponsor as they see fit, as it currently stands. The reason you would want to get approval on the 1 and 2 star schools is to avoid something that we've seen potentially play out in other states where a low performing charter school is just authorizer hopping to avoid oversight. So that's why the existing sponsor you would want them to give the green light on it so that everyone could be in agreement. Look, this is in the best interest of these students for them to change sponsorship. We support it. It's in the best interest of kids.
Understood. I'm okay. I'm good.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Senator Hansen, please.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, how many charter schools are there right now in Nevada?
Charter schools or charter school campuses?
What's the difference?
Oh, gosh. Okay, there's about 45 charter school holders and about 85 campuses. So some charter schools have multiple campuses.
Okay, what percentage?
In the SPCSA.
What percentage currently are 1 or 2 on the scale?
Oh, it's very low. It's literally it's like it's very low. It's under 10%.
Good. Okay. Well, that's kind of what I was getting at because, I've watched this whole charter school thing develop over the years. And one of my mentors, Senator Maurice Washington, was kind of the father of some of the charter school stuff back in the 90s. You guys, so what percentage currently would this new bill affect? I mean, do you guys have some now where the current sponsor is not letting them out of their contract or whatever it is?
Melissa McAdam for the record. It's been years since we have had any charters, like I can't even remember. In the SPCSA's history, no one has changed from the SPCSA to the school districts or from the school districts to the SPCSA. So this isn't even a very common thing that goes on. Like it's.
Oh, good. We're not trying to solve a current problem then, is what I'm kind of getting at. Okay. Now, last time I checked, 10% of all the school kids in Nevada go to charter schools. What's the percentage? Is that still about 10%?
It's about 13% now.
Climbing still then. Okay, good. No, I got to say the charter school system's done phenomenally well. In my area, in my district, there are several of them. There are waiting lists. You know, there are people literally having drawings to try to get their kids into these schools. They are exceptionally popular. So I just want to thank you guys. You are public schools. To our discredit, the Nevada Legislature did not give the public school teachers in the charter schools the same raise they gave to the other ones, which is a real problem for me. You guys should have been, because you're outperforming all the rest of the public schools by far, not even close. Yet, rather than reward you, we actually, in effect, punished you by not giving you the raise that you fully earned. So I want you to know, a lot of us in the legislature, thank you so much for what you're doing. Wish we could have got the money that you earned fair and square, and are frankly disgraced by some of the other members of this body that didn't give public school teachers in the charter schools the pay raise they deserve. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. And I just remind everyone who is a member of the commission that this is not an appropriate forum for any ad hominem attacks on other members of the legislature. So let's try to keep our comments to the regulations before us. With that, do I have a motion, Assemblywoman? Yes. I have a motion to approve by Assemblywoman Backus. I have a second from the Vice Chair Harris. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously, and R073-23 for the State Board of Education will be adopted. Thank you so much. Okay, that means that we are on our next one, which is R110-23 for the for the Department of Motor Vehicles, which I believe was a request of Assemblyman DeLong. So we will let them get settled there in Carson City, and Assemblyman, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking on page 7. Let's see, which section is it? Section 5, subsection 7. You're limiting the number of contractual relationships an instructor may have to 3. I want to understand what the reasoning for limiting that is.
Andrew Lorette for the record, ANDREWLORETT. Thank you for the question. Going through the process, it was my understanding that current day, throughout all of the schools, that was already process being held, where at times only 3 individuals or 3 entities at times can hire a single individual. So we felt it was our best interest to just add that verbiage into the NRS to make it a standard across instead of something that was just commonly done anyways.
And just the Chair, a follow-on on that. So we're now establishing in state regulation limiting someone's ability to conduct business for, I'm not hearing a good reason other than, oh, that's the way they were doing it for some reason. So I have a problem with that portion of the regulation. Chair, that's all my questions.
Any additional questions from members of the commission? As a reminder to this commission and to everyone who is with us and watching, we are not at liberty to amend the regulations that are before us. We can either accept or deny. I would assume, although happy to be corrected, Assemblyman, that there is not a motion you are willing to make at this point with that concern over that section.
Yes, I am not willing to make a motion. If there is a motion, I will vote no.
Okay, so do I have I have a motion from Speaker Yeager to approve R 110-23 and a second from Vice Chair Harris. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, I counted 2 nays from Senator Stone and Assemblyman DeLong. Okay. Motion carries. R 110-23 for the Department of Motor Vehicles will be adopted. Thank you so much. All right, we are moving on to the next regulation on our agenda, which is R 128-23 for the Board of Wildlife Commissioners. And I believe, Senator Hansen, you had questions on this one, so I will turn it over to you. We are joined on the Zoom, so you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there somebody from the Wildlife Commission on Zoom also? Okay, I see it now.
Yes.
All right,
There
very good.
should be someone, I see them on Zoom, so.
Okay, just some general questions. Pole Canyon, you mentioned Franklin River. Is Pole Canyon on the east slope of the Ruby Mountains then? Is that where we're talking?
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioner Hansen, or Senator Hansen. Pole Canyon is on the southern end of the East Humboldt Range in Unit 101. So it's kind of on the southwest end of the East Humboldt Range.
Okay, so it's in Ruby Valley still, though. It's up because there's a bunch of unusual requirements on this. Now, Caleb, nice to see you. I didn't recognize you. Caleb's helped me on a bunch of stuff. Sorry, Madam Chair, for that personal moment. You guys have. It's a public-private partnership on a wildlife management area. What is this, privately owned ground that they're letting you create a wildlife management agency on, or do you guys have portions of it, or how does this work?
Yeah, yes, Senator. So this is a cooperative wildlife management area. So starting about 10 years ago, the department endeavored towards working with the private landowner in the area to develop a conservation easement on over 12,100 acres of private ground to protect the habitat qualities important for species such as migrating mule deer, sage grouse, and with that, there was a separate portion of that 12,000 plus acres, around 4,700 acres, that was put into a public access easement across a portion of the conservation easement. So these regulations pertain to that 4,700 acres of private land that's being managed in a cooperative wildlife management area.
Okay, so does the prohibitions in this new regulation apply only to the private portions of that ground? Because you guys are allowing guide services. It sounds like you're allowing upland game hunting, rabbit hunting, big game hunting, but then you exclude hunting any predator for some odd reason, and any trapping. But normally those are fully legal activities on the public domain in most wildlife management areas. Why the prohibitions in this case?
Yeah, that's correct, Senator Hansen. Great question. So as part of the considerations of the private landholders' wishes to achieve the other management objectives and the other easements and the greater public access to open that new 4,700 acres that has not been available to the public, the landowner requested specifically that these prohibitions be part of those easement. So those are recorded in the deed, in the easement deed, and so need to be reflected in the regulation language to make them enforceable.
Okay, I got it. So in order to get the cooperation of the private guy, he wanted these restrictions built into it, campfires and things like that. The easement question, now you and I have discussed this at length. Is this not an RS-2477 easement in the first place? I mean, why did we have to get a separate easement to cross? You know, it's already illegal to block access to the public domain on private property, both in Nevada law and United States law. Why do we need a separate easement to cross this property? Is this not an RS-2477 or a prescriptive easement right of way?
I'm not aware of it being an RS-2477 road. Yeah, so in that, you know, that's not abundantly clear how that's being handled within Elko County. And I can't speak more to that designation of this access route. But again, it's a across private property, and points well taken, but I can't speak to that specifically.
Okay, well, yeah, as you and I both know, there are huge areas on the East Range, Rubies, other areas where you have private landowners, in my opinion, illegally blocking the public from access to its own land, while at the same time, instead of it being multiple use, these guys monopolize it for either grazing or then actually lease it out to guide services and stuff. Anyway, I'm off topic. Last question for you guys on the Bruno River Wildlife Management Area. You guys now have included that in this. The one concern I've got is I just went down. I've trapped the Bruno River drainage for years. Familiar with most of it. When I went down last year, I think I went all the way down to Roland and cleared through that area. There's no signs designating where the wildlife management boundaries are down there. Has that changed in the last year or so?
Great question again, Senator Hansen. We have in our shop here in the Elko office signs prepared to put on the WMA to establish and identify to the public where these boundaries are, along the main ingress and egress routes out of the WMA.
Good. Well,
so that is in the works.
Good. Well, that's critically important because, if you're going to require people to have a permit to trap in there, for example, and yet you don't know where the boundary is, you could theoretically be trapping on the wildlife management area and you get cited for trapping in a wildlife, where you don't have the correct permit. And last question on the permits themselves. You mentioned a whole series of permits. Are those permits built into law so that they are guaranteed to be produced every year, or is it completely optional? I'm talking the trapping permits. For example, you guys are now going to require, on the Bruno River, you're now going to require, at least on that section of it, a permit from the Department of Wildlife before you can do that, where historically, obviously, that section of the river was trapped by Peter Ogden way back in 1800. So I'm kind of curious as to how you guys are dealing with the permit question.
Yeah, Senator Hansen, again, Caleb McAdoo for the record. A lot of those permit-based trapping permits really are put in when we were looking at restoration of riparian systems and looking at primarily beavers. And so that was kind of the concern previously. We did adopt, as you noted, the Bruno portion within this regulation, and that would be required as you indicate. And again, that signage will assist in notifying. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I just want to make sure that those permits are readily available for the people who want to access, because that's, as you know, a very isolated location. You really don't frankly need a permit because there's nothing there to regulate. Nobody's in there hardly, especially in the winter months when the things snowed in so heavily. Yeah, so I just want to make sure those permits are readily available for people that may, in fact, want to, trap an area that's very highly isolated, like the Bruno River Wildlife Management Area. So
our intention is to have permits available. We just want to have some ability to manage. It's not a huge area, and so want to have some ability to kind of understand how many trappers may be using the management area and just manage that within the balance and the capacities of the management area, and have an understanding of who might be trapping there.
Good. We need to make sure you have nice, clear delineations of the boundaries. Everything's well marked, so there isn't any confusion where somebody's getting cited for something that was completely unintentional. All right. Well, Madam Chair, unless nobody else has if somebody else has a question, I'll move for approval of R12823.
Thank you. Any members of the commission have additional questions? Seeing and hearing none, I have a motion to approve by Senator Hansen and a second from, from Speaker Yeager. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously, and R128-23 Board of Wildlife Commissioners will be adopted. The next regulation on our agenda is R130-23 for the Administrator of the Employment Security Division of the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. And this was a request from Assemblywoman Backus. So I believe we should have some folks joining us. And as they get settled, you can begin when everyone's ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure who would like to answer this question, but I was taking a look at one of the major portions that are being repealed, and it is all the regulations that pertains to the unemployment compensation bond fund. And at first I thought maybe it was because most of it got codified, but there's still some items in the regulations that were not put into statute that provide additional definitions and other procedures. So I was hoping to have a better understanding why we were repealing all of those regulations.
For the record, Troy Jordan, Deputy Director of DETR. The first reason is we still have the statutory authority to bond. And the main reason behind it is our chief economist, David Schmidt, has decided that the bonding in those regulations is not something we would do again, and I'm going to hand it off to him to explain why.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair and Assemblywoman, for the question. The regulations being repealed essentially implemented a very specific formula in response to the bonds that were issued following the Great Recession. By repealing the regulations, essentially what we do is we make sure that there is flexibility in the future so that if the statutory authority is ever needed again and the Board of Finance approves bonds, that any formula to collect the revenue to pay for those bonds would be responsive to the needs of the time. Between the agency and approval by the Legislative Commission, we would have that flexibility to respond appropriately instead of being tied down to a formula that we used 15 years in the past. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I realize I don't think I introduced myself. David Schmidt, Chief Economist for the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. Sorry.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that more detailed understanding of the repeal. With that, Madam Chair, I don't have any issue with that, and I'd be happy to move to approve unless there's someone else has a question.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the commission? Hearing none, I do have a motion from Assemblywoman Backus. I have a second from Vice Chair Harris. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously and R130-23 will be adopted. Thank you. And that brings us to the final regulation for our consideration today. It is R144-23 for the State Board of Pharmacy. And I am going to turn that over to Assemblyman DeLong, and we are joined on Zoom. So whenever you're ready, Assemblyman.
Thank you, Chair. A very simple question, and maybe just out of my ignorance on this chapter. Why is this one regulation, Roland? Why is it going on Schedule 4 versus Schedule 5?
Thank you for the question, sir. Dave Weiss for the record. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Board of Pharmacy. When the board schedules drugs, they take various things into effect, one of which is how the DEA and the feds and the FDA have scheduled it. They've scheduled it as a 4, and the board made the determination to match that scheduling.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the commission? Not hearing any. Do you have a motion to approve, Assemblyman?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I move that we approve R144-23.
Second.
Great. I have a motion from Assemblyman DeLong and a second from Senator Stone. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, hearing no opposition, then R144-23 for the State Board of Pharmacy will be approved. And members of the commission, that does conclude our business under item number 3. And that will bring us that will bring us to item number 5 on our agenda, which is the appointment of members to committees and similar entities. Commission members, there is documentation for this item on the dais in front of you. You should all have a sheet there for this particular item. We do have with us in our first legislative commission meeting our LCB director, Nick Anthony, who is here to assist with the appointment of members to various committees and similar entities. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to walk us through this item.
Thank you, Chair and Commission members. Before you, under Agenda Item 5 is the appointment of members to committees and similar entities. There are 3 appointments statutorily required for the Legislative Commission. The first is a appointment to the Commission on Ethics pursuant to NRS 281A.200. The Legislative Commission is required to appoint 4 members. The following appointment is for a vacant 4-year term. It would be Mike Langton. The second item is the appointment of members to the Nevada Silver-Haired Legislative Forum pursuant to NRS 427A.330. Legislative Commission is required to appoint a number of members equal to the number of senators. There are 2 members for new appointment for a term beginning January 1 and expiring December 31st, 2025. And then thirdly, for appointment for consideration today by the Commission, NRS 645B.019 requires the Legislative Commission to appoint 5 members from a list of persons provided by the Commissioner on Mortgage Lending to the Advisory Council on Mortgage Investments and Mortgage Lending. There is 1 appointment. It is a reappointment of Adam Horowitz. His current term expires May 16, 2024, and this appointment would be for 2 years. Thank you, Chair Cannizzaro. I'll be pleased to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Do any members of the commission have any questions on this particular item? I am not seeing any, and I do have a motion from Speaker Yeager and a second from Vice Chair Harris to approve these appointments. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, members, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 6, the approval of revised interim budgets and work programs for joint interim standing committees, which will also be presented by Director Anthony. And so, Mr. Anthony, when you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Before the Legislative Commission this afternoon, under Agenda Item 6, is the approval of revised budgets and work programs for joint interim standing committees. As this body may recall, last fall, the work programs and budgets were approved for the joint interim standing committees. This recommendation is a request by the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Education to request 1 additional meeting. 6 were approved last fall. This would be a 7th to occur this summer. And at the meeting, the Committee on Education plans to hear additional measures relating to studies pursuant to SB 72 and also plans to receive a study that's statutorily required by the Holocaust study that is typically received in the fall, but that will be available this summer, and further plans to take up professional support, teacher retention, and the like as required by NRS 391.496. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Great, Thank you. Members of the commission, do you have any questions for Director Anthony? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve this revised interim budget and work program? I have a motion from Speaker Yeager. I have a second from Vice Chair Harris. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 7, approval of the appointment of Research Director of the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. And again, I am going to turn it over to Director Anthony to walk us through this item.
Thank you, Chair Canizaro, and before the commission today, you should have documentation. It is my pleasure as newly appointed Director of the Council Bureau and as statutorily required pursuant to 218 F.100, the Director would like to recommend for appointment with Legislative Commission approval Ms. Jennifer Rudy from the Research Division. Ms. Rudy is currently a Deputy Director and has been so in the Research Division for the last 2+ years. She's supervised Policy Analyst Unit and CSU Unit, number of employees there. So it'd be my recommendation for approval of Jennifer Rudy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members, do I have a motion to approve the appointment of the Research Director?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Speaker Yeager. He beat you to it, but we have a second from Senator Krasner. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, hearing none, motion carries unanimously, and congratulations to Ms. Rudy on the appointment to serve as our new Research Director. Members of the commission, that brings us to item number 8, which is public comment. This next item is our second period of public comment. We will be accepting public comment in person here in the Grant Sawyer building in Las Vegas, and then we will move up to Carson City for anyone in the legislative building, and then we will move to anyone wishing to give public comment by phone. Please remember that comments will be limited to not more than 2 minutes per person, and if you have any additional comments after that 2-minute period, you are welcome to submit those to us in writing. If you are going to give public comment, please make sure that you sign in person here in Las Vegas or in Carson City, and we will go ahead and move. We don't have anybody here in Las Vegas. Don't see anybody rushing up in Carson City. So we're going to move right to our phone lines. BPS, do we have anyone waiting to give public comment this afternoon?
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to participate in public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to speak in public comment, please press *9 now. Chair, you have no one wishing to speak in public comment at this time.
Great, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And members of the commission, that does conclude item number 8, our second period of public comment, and brings us to our last item on the agenda, which is item number 9, adjournment. And seeing no further business to come before us today at the Legislative Commission, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much for being here today.